Okay, boys and girls, as we go through this lecture and this slideshow, you're going to be recording some of this information on your lecture and Civil War battles chart. So make sure that you have that pulled up in a separate tab. Make sure that you know where we're going to be writing. We're going to be writing on the first row where it says Sumter on the first column. Make sure you're following along. If you need to pause as we're watching this video to give you some extra time to write, that's perfectly fine. Also, after we've gone through this lecture, I'm also going to post the slides separately so that you can come back and look at them if you need to. So we'll be learning about the Battle of Fort Sumter. We're on the path to the Civil War. We know that Abraham Lincoln has been elected president. In a shocking turn of events, the Republican Party nominated Abraham Lincoln for president. With only 40% of the popular vote, Lincoln won the election despite being left off the ballot in most southern states. And we know that after Abraham Lincoln was elected, that South Carolina was not happy about it. Following the election of Lincoln, and with the future of slavery in serious doubt, South Carolina became the first state to secede from the Union. 6 other states soon followed. We are on the doorstep to the Civil War, and we've already learned that. So we pick up where we left off after the South Carolina and the 6 other states seceding, and that is in the year 1860. By the mid-1800s, the state's economy, that's South Carolina, the state's economy was largely tied to the production of cotton, which depended on slave labor. Over 400,000 were enslaved in South Carolina, and South Carolina became the first state to secede from the Union in 1860. What to do? Following its secession, South Carolina demanded that Union military forces immediately evacuate all forts in the state. So we can fill out 2 things on our chart. First, in the second column, it says the date and which state it took place in. So we are going to write South Carolina in that first box. Also, under important information, we want to jot down that South Carolina demanded that the Union military evacuate the state. Let's continue. Union Major General Richard Anderson moved his troops from Fort Moultrie to Fort Sumter in Charleston Harbor because he thought it was more easily defended. So under important people and their role, we're going to write General Richard Anderson, and we're going to make a note that he was the Union general. South Carolina was able to seize all forts other than Sumter. So South Carolina was telling the Union to get out of their state. South Carolina was able to take back all of the forts in their state except for Fort Sumter. So General Richard Anderson and his Union troops are at Fort Sumter. South Carolina fires first. At the time, James Buchanan was still president. So in your important people and their role section, we want to put James Buchanan and make a note that he was the president before Lincoln. So at this time, this is before Lincoln has become president. He's been elected, but he hasn't actually been put in office yet. So James Buchanan was the president before Lincoln. Okay, so President Buchanan, he sent a delivery of reinforcements to the soldiers within Fort Sumter. Reinforcements failed to arrive because the ships carrying them were fired upon from the South Carolina shore. So, Fort Sumter, remember there were Union soldiers there, and those soldiers needed reinforcements. So the president was sending reinforcements to the Union soldiers there. However, because South Carolina wanted those Union soldiers out, they fired upon the ships that the Union sent to resupply those soldiers. So South Carolina prevented those reinforcements from reaching Fort Sumter and the Union soldiers there. While all of this was happening, Jefferson Davis was appointed as the first president of the Confederate States of America. So, in your important people section, we need to make a note that Jefferson Davis was the president of the Confederate States of America. His first military appointment was P.G.T. Beauregard. Beauregard was made commander of Confederate forces in Charleston. So, under important people, we also want to put Beauregard. We don't have to put his initials, we can just write Beauregard and say that he was the commander of Confederate forces. So, if you remember, those South Carolina and the other 6 states that seceded from the Union before this time, they had formed a new country within the United States called the Confederate States of America, and they elected a man named Jefferson Davis to be their president. And Jefferson Davis appointed Beauregard as the commander of his forces in South Carolina. Okay. In the next year, in the first months of 1861, Union soldiers trapped inside Fort Sumter started running low on supplies. So remember, those reinforcements that President Buchanan tried to send never reached it because it was fired upon by South Carolina forces. President Abraham Lincoln had taken office and attempted to send reinforcements to the soldiers. So under important people now, we're going to write Abraham Lincoln and make a note that he became president in 1861. So once he became president, he also did the same thing that President Buchanan tried to do. He tried to send reinforcements to the soldiers that were in Fort Sumter. South Carolina Governor Francis Pickens refused to allow reinforcements through and instead demanded the Union troops at Fort Sumter surrender. So under important people, we're going to record Francis Pickens. He was the governor of South Carolina. And this is the second time that the Union has tried to send reinforcements to the soldiers at Fort Sumter. But Governor Pickens, again, refused to allow those reinforcements through and said instead he needed the Union troops at Fort Sumter to surrender and turn the fort back over to South Carolina. The bombardment. This is the actual battle. Following Anderson's refusal to surrender the fort, Confederate forces began bombarding it at 4:30 a.m. on April 12, 1861. This is considered the official start of the Civil War. So remember Anderson, he is the Union general, and he refused to surrender when Governor Pickens demanded that they do so. So because they refused to surrender and refused to turn the fort back over to South Carolina, South Carolina's Confederate forces began firing upon the Union soldiers at Fort Sumter. They began sending bombs, shooting cannons, things like that. So that was on April 12th, 1861. We need to record that underneath the date in which the battle took place on your chart. And then this is one of the most important pieces of information you need to know about the Battle of Fort Sumter. So under important information, we need to know that this was considered the first official battle and the official start of the Civil War. So record that. Anderson's men were outmanned and outgunned. The battle lasted about 34 hours before he was forced to surrender, giving Confederate troops the victory. So on your chart underneath winner, we're going to record the Confederates. And just for your own reminder, in that same box, you can put in parentheses the South. Remember, Confederate troops were in the South, Union troops were from the North. So Anderson, who was the Union general, he was unable to withstand the bombardment from the Confederate forces. He and the Union troops had to surrender, and the Confederate troops took the first victory at the Battle of Fort Sumter.